everything. And we're saying this is bli gavul. You get to a state of truly infinite. Why, Baruch, is it not truly infinite when you're in Gan Eden HaTachton, even Gan Eden HaElyon?
It's only Hashem's revelations.
It's only Hashem's revelations.
And to be truly infinite is the finite has to be in the equation. It's only in this one.
But there is some finite, right, in the Lamaila.
Up there?
No? I mean, it's spiritual. Let's say the Or Ein Sof doesn't have any finite, but the Ray has some finite, right?
I guess it's only a ray.
Right. It's interesting. Over there, it's interesting. It's interesting actually. You just kind of like opened up a little bit of a question. Up there, what's lacking from it is that, so to speak, it's limited. We always say it's limited because it's just a ray, which means the darkness, like surrounded on all sides, it actually has a measure, the ray itself, high and low. So what's lacking from it is that it's finite to a certain degree. But then what we always say is that it's infinite and you need the finite to come down here. Just as I think, okay, everything's like inter-included. It seems like when the, okay, I don't know. Don't want to trip out on that question too much.
It's
infinite. It's awesome.
I'm saying.
Cool.
As a measure of, I guess the idea is that the finite which is there is not finite enough. It's like a finite where it's blurred. Like when you come into Gashmi, it becomes mamish finite. There's no more infinite. There you have infinite. It's just infinite in a limited form, right? And that's why when we find ourselves mamish in the finite form, we're like, well, I don't want any more infinite in the limited form. If I'm already going to be, if I'm already going to go for the infinite, I want infinite in the full-on infinite form. So you don't want any more Gan Eden HaTachton, Gan Eden HaElyon. Okay. Anyway, so how do you get it? From the darkness is where you tap into this bli gavul, b'chol miyodecha. You only sort of run like mad, or be able to turn your animal into love, which is a maila mitam v'das type of love, when you get to the place of the animal. Take it from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the first column. The first paragraph, the first column from the bottom 5 lines up at the period. Shu bli gavul kanal, shi madrega hayoser gavoa, mayosam kodam yuridasa baguf. This is a level of bli gavul, which means that down here you get to a higher level than you were before you descended into the body. Why? As we said many times, because you were just benefiting from the ray of the Shekhinah. How do you do it? Through these two means. Who can explain to me what's the difference between Yisuna or Mina Choshech? Right, this is a little quiz. Mm-hmm. Let's say there's two definitions of it. One's connected with Iskafia, one's connected with Ishapcha. Who can explain to me how that works?
Ischafcha would be the one that you transform the darkness into light completely.
Okay.
And Iskafia would be the one that you take the dark. No, that in the dark light is it's how to say the word? It's perceivable. More perceivable.
Okay, I hear what you're saying there.
What was your question?
The question was, what's the connection with Iskafia and Ishapcha?
Oh.
Right? To the two explanations of the verse Yisrona or Mina Choshech. So I think you passed the quiz, but just so everyone can understand, what are the two levels of Yisrona or Mina Choshech? Baruch, how do you explain the two levels? Two explanations. Advantage of light from darkness.
Oh, advantage of light from darkness?
Yisrun ha'or mina choshech. There's an advantage of light from the darkness. The two explanations.
Of like transformation? Oh, okay. I think the two explanations, the first one is like, the advantage of darkness is that it makes the light better.
The advantage of light from darkness.
Yeah, the advantage of light from darkness is that when you're in the darkness, like you appreciate the light more.
Okay, so the advantage of light when you're in the darkness. Yeah. Okay.
And the second one was that you transform the darkness into light.
So why is the first one called? Okay, so all he's saying here is that those two are respectively called Hiskafi and Hishapcha. We're attaching these like classic two forms of Avodas Hashem to these two definitions of turning darkness into light. Okay. She b'chinas yisuna or mitocha choshech, right? It's the advantage of light comes from within the very darkness itself. Lefisha shorshim lamayla gavo midregas nefesh elokis, as we said, because the darkness, the root of the darkness, which is the nefesh abahamis, comes from a place which is higher than the nefesh elokis, and therefore the only way the nefesh elokis can actually get to such a level is in this case to go down. It's not really going down; it's going up. But the only place that he can access the higher levels is in the lower things.
Nefesh Bahamas has a higher source?
Yes. That's a chiddush to you?
What's its source?
Tohu. And the Nefesh Elokis is Tikkun. That's a chiddush?
I mean, the Neshamas, aren't they rooted in Atzmus? Or even everything?
Okay, so that's a good call. That's what's confusing you. So we said also yesterday, then yeah, there is a level whereby ultimately the Jewish soul comes from even a higher source than Tohu. True. But I guess we're talking about its revealed state. In other words, that ultimately, why are we dependent on physical things to live, right? And why, b'chalal, does the soul need to come down into this body? So it's because the things that we live on, that enliven us physically, they're also enlivening us spiritually because they come from a higher source, Tohu. And we come down to this body because even though we're sitting in the rays of Gan Eden, there's a level of divinity which is beyond Gan Eden that we can only get from being here. So, yeah. The source is higher. But what? Rakshanaflu lamata. They just fell. In other words, why are they below? In other words, up. If their source is higher, then why down here are we given a commandment to rule over all the animals of the earth? And basically, the whole earth is like basically our kingdom. It's below us for sure. We walk on it and we tread upon it, because in their fallen state, then they become lower than us. So the idea is that. And we spoke slightly yesterday about how, like the mechanics of that because they're sort of unable to fit into Kalim, they're so high that in a world which is based on trying to fit into Kalim, they're Kalim that don't go together. They become klippas that cannot anymore maintain and show a wholeness, right? Because Lamailin Tohu, they were unable to be contained. So therefore they're still somewhat unable to be contained. You can't put them all together and sort of make them harmonious. So therefore the Jew, who comes from a slightly lower level above, where he is able to maintain a unity, he comes down now and dominates over them to try and make unity out of these broken pieces. But ultimately, the reason they broke in the first place is because they're unable to be contained in Keli. As it says, V'yimloch v'yamas, as it says, V'yamas, as it says that all these kings of Edom reigned quickly and died, which is referring to the spheres of Tohu that could not maintain themselves in the presence of another infinite sphera. But al yedei iskafia naisa tchias amesim. So this is a very cool, like sort of shot on what tchias amesim is. What does it mean really, the enlivening of the dead? It's much bigger than just people popping out of their graves. It's the idea of like the totality of the dead spheros that fell because they reigned and they died. So the whole idea of the falling from Tohu to get down into this and to create Gashmias, it's called a death. And therefore, when we'll utilize the world for what it was meant to be utilized for, which is to turn away from the evil, it makes us stronger by longing for God more, or we can actually take it and transform it into godliness, then we revive the dead. Because what was dead about them is they could not, champion the unity of Hashem. But with the help of a Yid who comes from a state of tikkun and then ultimately puts the whole pieces back together, now they can. We put the vessel back together. So what do we gain? We now have the source, which is higher than vessels, but because of the work of tikkun, of the neshamas, we're able to put nonetheless that light into vessels. So we have an infinite light inside of vessels now. So that's called tchias amesim. You basically revived what was dead about them is they could no longer show the unity of God. After 4,000 years of whatever, of our sojourn here, this is what we did. We sort of put them back together and made them all show God. You following?
Yeah.
Well, have we? Is that process finished?
Yes, actually. Good news is the Rabbi said that in 1990 we finished that process of refining the entire world. It's completely done. And in fact, therefore, Mashiach is not even around the corner. He's here, and all we must do is open our eyes to see that. We're in a truly unique moment in time, and we don't really understand it.
Woo! It seems like it's a very, it is a very perfectly unified structure of how the world works. When
Right.
looking at it from this perspective, everything in every perspective, but this one specifically.
Right.
So I think So when a Jew studies about this, when you
Right.
learn about it, there's no way you cannot, like
Do
feel.
tshuva.
Yeah, do tshuva in a way, right? Compared to like seeing the unity in like I don't know, like physics, you
Right.
can also feel, but not really, because it's just like Torah and Torah
Well,
words and
physics is
Torah.
part of this, but this is not part of their theory. It
That's
doesn't-
what-
like
that's
they
what
didn't
I'm
they
saying.
didn't figure this out yet because you only get this from
That's what I'm
God.
saying.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking is like, what if like a non-Jew studies this? Like,
On the
what do they
contrary. They
like,
would want to also become refined. It's like,
Right.
why is this so
so perfect? So
well, so useful is because your nefesh of Bahamas understands it.
Ah,
Your godly
right.
soul has understood these things for all generations.
Right.
Suddenly, in the end of days, when we're actually finishing the job, it's because your goof understands it. Your animal. So if your animal understands it, it's not very far away from their animal understanding it. In the end of the days, they and we are going to all willingly be serving Hashem with our fullest capacities, and that means we're going to be the man that is riding on the animal. They're going to be this giant animal, basically, and happily so, because they're going to be having the king like on top of him. They're a blessed beast. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So in a certain sense, we're like a miniature version of the world, because we also have an animal soul. So when the Yidden are finally getting it together. You know what I'm saying? Well, it says that the Nineveh, we talked about on last Shabbos, Nineveh, where Yonah was supposed to go and make them all do tshuva, it was called this great city that took 3 days to walk from end to end, and it said they had in there Behema Rabbah. And this becomes like a very, which means a lot of animals. It was a city filled with people and a lot of animals. But Behema Rabbah is a Kabbalistic term, taken from there. And Behema Rabbah means there's the Behema below the man, and there's the Behema above the man. And that's what we're talking about right now, in fact, that the animal soul, if you want to know what are the Goyim going to say, they're going to be upset? No. We're basically saying that, on the contrary, the animal soul is higher than the godly soul. It's just there's the lower Behema and there's the Behema Rabbah, which is above. So basically, they're going to be embodying the Behema Rabbah. It's an unbridled. Okay, it doesn't have seichel. Okay, you can't put it. It couldn't train itself. But having been trained, it's like amazing. It's a fabulous thing to be a behema at that level, because you're like unbridled passion for Hashem. It puts intellect to shame.
Can they be? Sounds like a weird question. Can they be trained though, because they're coming from that toho?
They can be trained. They can be, because we take the world and we say, don't do it like this, don't do it like this, shave off a little there, but now it fits. In other words, we take them and we do mitzvahs with them. And when we do mitzvahs with them, we don't allow the physicality to get out of line. In other words, we put the shape to it. It's like a massive blob that cannot sort of find itself. And when you apply the Torah to it, it all fits in and like creates a certain unity, which is what our job is. To run the world with the kingdom of Hashem. Got to get that going, David.
yes.
Okay, let's go on.
There's a big movement around the world, people coming like that.
Yeah, big.
Big in Asia.
Behema Rabbah.
Really big in Asia.
It's big everywhere, man. It's like it's big because what we hear about is the troublemakers. But the unspoken masses of the world now, because this is an international issue, are with us. They're just like waiting for someone to stand up and do something good. The villain, for example, Putin was like this conqueror. He's a hero of the world now, because he's like, I'll take them on. Anyone's going to stand up and say the simplest thing. He's a hero.
Yeah. So funny.
Today it's really interesting. That's what the Rebbe is saying with
insane.
Shiachs here. If you stand up and you just say what you know to be a simple fact, and everybody knows, you think everybody knows, when you say that up and say it in a public forum, you're a mamash a hero, because people are just waiting to hear words of truth right now. They're just waiting.
The Goyim all do have something in common, whatever side they claim to be on, and that's that they're like curious, like what is it with these Jewish people? Like, what are they supposed to be doing?
They know also. They know better than we do.
Yeah, they know.
What do
No,
you
you're
expect
right.
from them?
You're right. But it's you got to say it. But it's weird. Okay. Anyway, let's go
In the
by.
parsha, Shem will stay with Japheth. They'll be in the tents. He'll hold them, right? Similar
I
thing.
like that. The Indian of being in a tent is that you can contain them.
Right.
That's the Indian of so it started off as a tent, and then a bayis, and then it became the temple, right? A house. It's like a mom is permanent, and that's good. Okay. I told you the Alter Rebbe, this is like, you could say the whole Chassidus is based on this line. This is what it means. It's better 1 hour of tshuva and ma'asim tovim in this world than the whole life of the world to come. as we said before.
And now we
can understand it. V'lezo snikra mayim rabim hanal mei Noach, and that's why these horrible floodwaters, which are seemingly destroying the earth, are really called the waters of Noach. Noach is like a naicha darucha. Noach's a fabulous thing. Noach is like tzaddik, and it represents Shabbos. So why are these floodwaters called mei Noach? The fisha naicha naicha darucha, because from them it creates a tremendous nachas ruach. The ultimate pleasing, awesome satisfaction comes because of these waters. Shenais mehem tevas Noach. Why? This is like basically has become very famous, but the first time I read this, it was shockingly amazing. So he says, Shenais mehem tevas Noach, because you make from these waters, dafka, a teva. You make an ark. You build an ark. What is the inyan of tevas Noach? Hu bechinas tevas hatefillah. This is the words of davening, right? You guys familiar with this little beautiful drasha? The teva. The word teva means word as well.
Right.
The word teva means word.
Right.
So we talk about the tevas Noach. You're talking about an ark, but this is one of the places where you can just see the pshat of the thing. Actually, so what is the Torah talking about? Tevas Noach is the word of Noach, literally, and that means that when you build yourself the word of Noach upon these floodwaters, that's when you get the benefit from them. In other words, this answers the question that everyone's been asking, like, so if the clippers are so good, like, why don't I just go get into there, right? Like, it's like underlying the conversation, right? Like going down suddenly is going up, so why don't we go as far down as we possibly can? Like, what's the point? If the darkness is where... So the idea is that the darkness is from the darkness, through the darkness, you get this level of the essence, but how? By building a teva. In other words, if the darkness is the floodwaters, what was their productivity? Was the ark upon them. And what is the ark? Ultimately, the words of davening is what he says. Teva satafila. And let me just say one more word about that. And the idea is what? What did we say before? That when you're inundated with all this physicality and worldliness around you, what are you supposed to do? Go meditate. And realize what this world really is for a second, and that's going to give you the longing. So everyone's always sitting in the middle of the floodwaters. The point he's trying to say is, if you're constantly building an ark, so you're constantly getting the utility and the usefulness out of these floodwaters, they're going to raise you up. But it all depends on not just being in them, but sort of realizing what they are, and that's represented by building this teva.
I can't take this anymore, like this world. Like I have to get out of this.
Yeah, like basically I have to get out, or to a deeper level, like what is this world really? It's a ray inside of the Or Ein Sof. It itself is godliness. Don't pretend that you're something else, and that's his hapcha, that's transformation, then you can actually use it for godliness. So those are the two levels we just described. We keep going back and forth. There's one and then the other. His kafi and then his
How
hapcha.
does that work with the floating above it type of thing?
Because the floodwaters, okay, you're saying they elevate you, in other words, now you're not in the water. On the contrary, you're now on a very high place. How did you get there? These waters themselves, you're not trying to get away from them. On one level, you're trying to get away from them. It's right.
On them.
It's right there in the story of Noach. The two levels. On one hand, you're building an ark to run away, right? At first off, you're building an ark because you don't want to get drowned. So that's basically saying like the darkness is making you appreciate the light more. That's level one, iskafia. But then, as he's going to say in a moment, the floodwaters become your best friend. You've never been on the tallest mountain, let alone 15 amos above the tallest mountain. That's like an unbelievable level of highness. You understand? The waters bring you up. You use the waters. You don't just protect yourself from the waters. That's level 2. And that's exactly the next line. V'zehu v'yikberu hamayim ma'od. Wow, how do you like that? It's the next line. Here's what it says, and the waters became very strong. 15 amos above the highest mountain. Gavru hamayim. The waters became mighty. Shu b'chinas tigvoras nefesh bahamis al b'chinas nefesh elokis. What is this? This is like the overpowering of the animal soul upon the godly soul. Be'esek parnasa, by having to make a living, vinyanim hagashmi, and all kinds of physical concerns. So basically they drowned you to the point that they're not only above your head, they're above the highest mountain. But from this comes the great advantage from darkness. Suddenly you realize that you're drowning, but there's a positive thing over here, that I can use these waters to elevate me to a place I've never been before. V'zeu v'teilech hateva al pnei hamayim dafka, and that's why it says that the ark went upon the face of the waters. Dafka. It was, in other words, it lifted. V'taram hateva, and it elevated the teva. In other words, if we go back to the idea of teva satafila for a second, let's just get this real. This is a real clean idea. Is that if the teva means really words of davening, then what lifts up your words of davening, what allows your davening to go higher and higher,
Darkness.
is dafka the darkness. When you really daven,
Yeah, when you're
right?
like going crazy.
So now here's the thing: you're either davening because chas v'chalila, and all of a sudden, like, you realize how dark this world is, and you want to get out of it because Hashem ad masad, we have to lose a shliach of such a caliber like Rabbi Tzaitlin, and it's a mamish disaster. Like, get me out of this world. On one hand, you pashat pray more because like you're in the dark. On the other hand, that's called running away from something. This level of transformation is that, okay, so what am I supposed to do with this? I'm going to run towards something. I'm going to be like him. I'm going to be like a shliach that spends all my waking hours. That's also that passion of the darkness. But in this capacity, you're not using it to run away. You're running into it and elevating it with like the same intensity. And that's what it means also raises up. It raises you up. That's what the Rebbe ultimately wanted from us. He wanted us to be feel like we were in the middle of a war. The intensity and the pressure and like the harsh reality, and be working at that level of intensity in the positive, in the good. Like, you can't sleep at night, Pasha, because you got work to do, right? And what's the work? It's the work of holiness. It's the work of transforming this world. To get to that in that mindset, that's really what the whole Chassidus is trying to get us to do. To be like mad about being Jewish in the most intense way. Pasha inspiration. Chaim.
Chaim.
Sha'al yidei hamayim dafka, through the water, specifically through the water, misa'alos tevos hatafila, it raises up your words of prayer, va'ola l'mayla mayla kanal, and it goes all the way up. That's what gets your prayer to actually touch Hashem. V'zeu taus habali asakim shebedaitam she'in yochol nispal kol kach. He says, and this is the great folly and mistake of the businessmen, that in their mind they think that they don't have the ability to daven so much, like people who sit and learn yeshiva all day. He says, Ki adarabba, nafochu. On the contrary, it's the exact opposite. Shehem yochol nispal yoser. They are better daveners. Ki yisru na'or hu mitoch hachoshech dafka. This is what Shalom was saying. Sooner or later, Baruch, you're going to run out of this place. You're going to run into the world. Because you're going to want to daven better, and you think you can daven better in yeshiva, but no, adarabba, nafochu. You can't, because you're not flooded, you're not inundated. Your food is served. It's like Mamash Gan Eden over here. You just have everything you need. You don't have to worry about it. You just sit in the clouds, basically, right?
Yep.
Which is good. You can't go into the darkness unless you know how to daven. If you do not know how to daven, then for sure you're not going to be a great davener of a shopkeeper. You don't know how to daven. So yeshiva 100% is the first step. But the Rebbe's whole inyan is that, I just read a letter yesterday. The Rebbe was like really shocked and appalled that there was a great mind wanted to sit and stay and learn and like kollel and like write books and stuff like that, be in the world of holiness. Because he said, how in the midst of like the national tragedy that all of our youth are going off, can you just sit there and read books? Like, go get involved. I mean, alavai, we could all sit there and read books.
Well, isn't that what the Rebbe wanted to do also?
That's what I said. The Rebbe was.
Oh, you're talking
What?
about he himself?
He was that he wanted to do it himself, but he had to.
He also wanted to sit down and study and read and write books all the time.
Well, he actually did while he was in the middle of saving the world. That's the biggest miracle. I don't know any Jewish author that's written more books than him. Strangely. Meanwhile, he was like a man of action. But no, 100%. That's the idea.
There's a story I heard about someone who's a baker and he's like adapting all that. And somebody comes to him and says, like, offers to basically, I'll support you as you learn. You sit in kollel. And he does it for a while, and then he says, like, I can't keep doing this. I have to go back to baking because my davening is no longer.
Yeah, that's the idea. So this is exactly what we're saying. Nafochu, adarabba. It's the other way around. Your davening is better when you're in the world. Because the waters lift up your words, your teva. That's why it's called Neicha Derucha, a Nachas Ruach, as it were. Shubachin is Hashabbos, which represents what? We already said the word Noach means Shabbos. In other words, what happens from the darkness is a true Shabbos. What is Shabbos? Shabbos is tefillah. Shabbos is basically called Aliyas Ha'olamos, right? Shabbos is called elevating the worlds. So how do you elevate the worlds? When you basically build an ark from the floodwaters, you make the worlds serve God. You bring up all the worlds. All the darkness basically becomes a vehicle for pushing your prayers up. That's what it means to elevate the worlds. The world become more spiritual. They become on a higher level because they themselves have realized their true purpose, which is to help a Jew pray better, to be utilized for a Jew. So therefore Shabbos is called the elevation of the worlds. Mei Noach. You rest from all your work. So how is it connected with the actual Shabbos laws and so forth? You rest from work. Because in the 6 days of the week represents the expression and the drawing forth of Hashem's Malchus, sphere of Malchus also, Lamata, down below. In other words, he takes himself and he extends it into the work week. Just like a king who would basically have to sort of get busy running his country. He's not just like sitting there in his malchus, sort of enjoying his own awesomeness and the timing of just being himself, like writing books and just sort of like being in your study. Like what he achieves, what he could achieve when he's alone in his study is pretty amazing. But he takes himself out of that and he starts to run his country and he gets busy with like all kinds of taxes and things which are be'erech, are below his level. This is what Hashem does this whole 6 days of the week.
But then the world, I mean, just a question. So the world started in Yom Rishon, didn't it? So what? So how is it then the whole world that every week is like the effect of Shabbos? How is that if like the first day was Yom Rishon and not Shabbos?
It's a good question. It seems like it started from nothing, though.
Right.
So that nothingness really is like the great Shabbos that like we don't see. So every time you get to the seventh day, you have a piece of like what happened before there was anything. It's like Shabbos is basically going back to where you were before you went down.
Right.
So that's actually just a good chap on what Shabbos really is. It's like basically getting back to before the beginning.
Right.
It was on the first day he made that light, and then he separated it. The light was put away, and that light will come back for Shabbos, isn't it?
Yeah. But I'm saying, according to what Shaul was saying, there's something before that, even that first light. That first light is already chesed.
Day one. He's
right.
about Yom Rishon.
No, he's talking about, his question was, if it starts with Yom Rishon, we're saying now that we're giving the analogy of like a king who gets out of busy doing what like he would do by himself and starts to activate, be like operational in the world. So his question was, how does it start off then with him being operational in the world? Seemingly, it should start out with him being by himself, and therefore Shabbos should have come first before Yom Rishon. That was what he was asking. So the point is that we're saying maybe as the possible answer, it does. The whole idea of like nothingness that existed before creation was the king all by himself, and therefore whenever Shabbos pops into the world, it's like you're accessing that original. You're bringing the whole world now back up with you into that place. And as far as the first light that comes on Yom Rishon, what do we see from there? That even though that's, so to speak, like the Or Ein Sof, that's not even Shabbos yet. There's something before that. That's the first expression. That's like the first step down of the king to get bothered and busy doing what we're doing.
Maybe that's like Keter, and then the next Shabbos is Malchus or something like that. Maybe. See what I mean?
Yeah. I think definitely. Keser Malchus is like the same thing.
It's
they
like
just keep reappearing. There's something called. They say there's something called the Hishtalshlus Haksari. This is a very kind of key term. There's the Kesarim, the Kesers. They are mishtalshel one from the other. They have their own unique journey through the Seder Hishtalshelus. Keser is the level of Keser above Chochmah. Keser is a crown.
Oh,
Keser. So the idea is that the other spheros, they go through this process where they get all tied up one with the other. And therefore they change as they go from chesed to gevurah, right? In other words, there's basically like a an enclosure of another sort of level of garment and another level of garment, and therefore they're all very different, all very unique from each other because they're sort of a prism of light in a different way. When it gets down to Malchus, which is basically the Kesser of the lower world, there's a jump from the original Kesser down to the next Kesser, which is really Malchus, but let's call Malchus Kesser. This Kesser is in between every world. So that Kesser does not receive the enclosed version that it got from the sphere, let's say right above it, of Yesod, which got an enclosed version from above it, which was Hod and Netzach. It's not like a bunch of, it gets straight away a shot from the original Kesser, because the Kessers have their own relationship one to the other, where they are basically just a reappearance of the same level popping into, and that's how that travels down the Yishtalshlus. The infinite travels down through the Yishtalshlus through popping in at every level of Kesser. So there is a stage of sort of pre-creation, or what we're calling Shabbos, in every single level of creation, and the way that it wedges itself in there is it creates a whole bunch of like 9 spheros, which basically create a new world, a new level of garment and contraction, and contraction. And then every week, every like DNA strand, like of like existence from the beginning of this kav, but it never totally conceals the original essence because it keeps popping up in every place through all the ksarim. So that's kind of what we're saying. Chaim. So the Nei Noach. Okay, so we're talking about the Vav. The 6 days of the week are an expression of the king. Like Yom Rishon, he says, Yehi Or, Yehi Rakia, Tad Sheya Aretz Desha. Let there be light. Let there be a firmament. Let the earth sprout forth vegetation. All these things, day 1, 2, 3. Shenikroim Yimei HaMaisa. They're called Yimei HaMaisa. They're called days of deed. Maisa. That's a exacting term. Sheishis Yimei Bereishis. Sheishis Yimei HaMaisa. Which means that Hashem's going down into a level of deed. Like imagine like a king or a Rebbe all of a sudden, like so to speak, tying his shoe. It's like, why would you take all that mamish Rebbe and in mind and everything that it is and like put it into a tiny deed? So that's what Hashem does when He creates the world. He goes down to the days of deed. And Shabbos, who bechinas shvisa memalacha. That's the whole idea, is that he stops working, which means he goes back to a state of original, awesome inwardness of being the king in his study, like finding things that are totally beyond the world. He's not busy anymore with the world, and that So now, in the case of what we're saying now, according to that, the world would cease to exist seemingly, right? If Hashem all of a sudden stopped expressing Himself, the world would go away. But what we're saying is that it's not that the world goes away; it's that he so to speak, leaves the world where it is, but unleashes within it a level of Him as He was by Himself. That's what we're saying about the floodwaters. The floodwaters basically rise up the person to a new place. So and the whole purpose of the world, if you're going to now suddenly step away from the world and come to a real recognition that the entire world is there to serve Hashem, and all your worries were like this unbelievable hashgacha pratis which brought you, so you've basically taken the whole world with you if you think about it, because everything that had to do with you in this world has now found its real purpose because of your grasp of the matter, and is now all the world has been used literally to serve Hashem. In other words, when you realize it, you sort of affect it. You change the actual nature of the world. You understand what I'm saying there? Because the world now has come to its purpose. It's like, let me put it like this. It says in Svarim that the purpose of the domem, of the inanimate, is to become plant. And the purpose of the plant is to become animal. And the purpose of animal is to become man. Everything wants to go up. Everything wants to achieve its purpose. That's why it's here. Right? But that's why basically plants are just made from growing earth, right? It's like a step up in the hierarchy. Until the plant, the dirt you actually plant a seed and the dirt actually becomes a plant. It's true that the dirt is sitting there in order to become a plant, but it hasn't yet. It hasn't fulfilled its mission. It hasn't basically been used for its real job. So even though it's the same thing is true like on a spiritual level, even though the Jews, the whole purpose of the world is to serve a Jew, and every second a Jew is in the world, it's there to be a vessel for him to bring godliness into, until he sort of realizes that that's what he's doing. It's like he hasn't actually planted the seed yet. He hasn't actually taken the world and used it for its purpose. It's there for his purpose. It's just waiting there for him to do that with him. But until he comes to that realization, that is its elevation. Because he's now basically come to the realization that it's all godliness. It's waiting for his mind to come to that realization. So just one last point. So that's called the Shabbos. You sort of come out of your weekday work, you pray, which means you separate yourself from the world, and you bring the whole world with you. And in doing so, you actually make the waters no longer destructive waters. These are now the waters which saved Noach's life. These are now, so you've actually changed the nature of the darkness to light. And that's what it means to elevate the world. Every Shabbos, the world actually mamish gets a little bit greater, a little bit more refined. Some real change happens to it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. There's that scientific principle that things are very small. It depends on the way that someone looks at it, changes the properties of it.
There you go.
So
Bingo.
The way someone, if they look at it, they see Kedusha in it, then it changes
the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Something like that, yeah.
Those things that are really small are light particles, actually.
Yeah, that is a brilliant observation, Baruch. That's exactly what we're saying, basically. Yeah. The observer not only scientifically, beautiful word, not only sort of scientifically changes the physical reality, your observation of it changes the spiritual reality as well. And that's good.
Wait, so that's the way that's what avoids you to make a complete separation of what happens in the weekend, what happens in Shabbos, because one could think, it's in the flood waters and this and that, and then the moment that Shabbos arrives, that you're not in the flood waters anymore. Exactly. It's a different. It's something that separates.
That's the din of Shabbos. Realizing it's called. You have to, right when Shabbos comes in, and just to reiterate also your beautiful point, you have to consider as all of your work is done. Like you have nothing else to do. It's finished. Your whole job is done. That's what you're saying. Because if you bring any type of Shabbos, of a weekday into Shabbos, like you don't fulfill this.
Right, but should you But the thing is that it can happen that unconsciously that makes a separation. Shabbos ends, and then back to.
It is, but remember we talked about also from the Bima on Shabbos. There's an Indian of Baruch Hamavdil. You draw the Baruch is that you don't just make Havdalah.
Right.
You draw you've permanently changed the world.
Right.
The world is now on a level which the last Shabbos. It has affected it.
Right, you can't avoid that. You can't avoid that. Right.
It's like you're in a new age,
Right.
Literally, you're like in a new generation in a certain level every week, and therefore you're automatically doing everything. Your work is now on being affected by the previous.
Realizing it, then that will really change it a lot more. According to what we're saying.
According to what we're saying, it really all has to do with your figuring. That's why I guess the Rebbe is saying, and Rabbi Shiach's already here, open your eyes. Open your eyes is still some last thing to do. It's like before it said you have to polish the buttons, we polish the buttons.
Right.
Rabbi Shiach's here, open your eyes. There's still one thing left to do.
Last thing to
and it's just to come to the basic realization of what's going on, to be constantly building this ark and therefore utilizing the world.
It's like Shabbos. You work the whole week.
Yom Shekulo Shabbos,
and then you get in Shabbos, and then you get into the Shabbos, and then you have to the last thing you have to do is just open your eyes and bring it to the.
We're saying there's Shabbos in the beginning. We said Noach.
Yeah.
There's the Shabbos of the week, and then there's the day that's all Shabbos, right? So what does it mean the day that's all Shabbos? That you're constantly in a state of Shabbos, in this notion that you never have to sort of go back down into the thing. And that's what the Rebbe is saying. We're in that 7,000th year has begun. If you open your eyes, because you're tasting the Shabbos right now, it's just about being able to access this consciousness. You see, this consciousness is so accessible to us now. You still have to open a book, you still have to stop and think about it. But in the old days, even if they wanted to stop and think about it, it's very hard to find that in the pages of Gemara, of Eruvin. It's not talking about that. So this level of consciousness of just thinking about Chassidus and being in this state of mind, it's pashut everywhere, anytime you want it, in all the osios you can imagine, all the letters that you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So that's what it means, Yom Shekulo Shabbos. If Shabbos is really, in fact, just this notion of elevating the world with your thoughts, then it's available to us already at every single instant. Chaim. So it is. We have a few minutes left. Let's see if we can sort of, get down to the bottom of the matter, because we want to finish the mimer. I guess we could always still go with this mimer tomorrow on Shabbos.
And do it again.
We could do it again, or we could okay, so usually we do something different on Shabbos, but the different thing that we usually do is this book.
This anyways, yeah.
Sounds good. Anyway, so let's just do one more line then. Shabbos is Naicha Derucha. It's an Aliyas HaOlamos, as he says, an elevation of the worlds. Lamaila Ka'adam hashoves v'nach mimalachto, like a person who rests, Noach, from his work, as we said. So it is the burdens of making a living during the 6 days of the week. Binyanim Gashmi, they're called floodwaters. Right? It's about acharkach. When you turn them over and elevate afterwards, b'chinas elokus, al yedei hatefillah, when you're now going to go spend time with God through davening and basically just thinking. What is davening? Davening is thinking, by the way. It's not something you can only do 3 times a day. It says alavai shemispal kol hayom. There's such an expression. Alavai, we should daven the entire day long, and there's a sort of truth to that, because it's about thought. It says tefillah bli machshava is kaguf bli neshama. Right? Davening without thinking is like a body without a soul, which means it's not alive. So the whole idea of davening is not really standing there saying those words. It's thinking, pashut, meditating. That's why we do all this work that we do, dafka, before we make our big daven, because we want to make sure when we hit davening, we're like thinking.
I want to ask you if when we say mechayam etzim also applies for that, maybe.
Of course it does.
Some people who like, if you don't think, including us, if you don't think when you daven, you're like, more met.
Oh, very good.
So then mechayam etzim, like.
Yeah, I thought you meant this, the chayes mesim that we said here.
All
the perushim, chayes mesim. The more you think, the better. So this is now when you go out of your weekday work and you go into Elokus land through davening, canal. That's called a nachas ruach. You basically elevate everything that you've been doing. Literally, it's always hard for a person to say, how do I elevate the week, But if you look at it like this, it makes a lot of sense. And everything that you did now, because of your thoughts, has become, if you think about it properly, has become a function of basically being there to push you towards Hashem. You basically, you're putting your mind on every single matter, is what actually gets the kishkas of the matter. You dig yourself into it by thinking about it. That's why I guess the students of the Baal Shem Tov were so obsessed with the idea of hashgacha pratis. They would say everything that happens to you in your day, you should realize it's a lesson in life from hashgacha pratis. You should find the message from it, which was their the Baal Shem Tov's big Chiddush onto all of Yiddishkeit. What is that really saying? It's saying that every single entity I'm going to elevate with my thoughts. I'm going to realize how this is an aspect of God, and what were the things that they were seeing were dafka worldly things. So they were living in a state of Shabbos, basically. That's what Shabbos is supposed to be.
Before that didn't exist?
No. The whole idea of hashgacha pratis is there was certainly a concept of hashgacha pratis. First of all, the Muslims also changed the notion of hashgacha pratis. They used to think that hashgacha pratis was specifically there was a machlokes, whether it was on just the works of man, but Hashem wasn't necessarily watching as closely like the works of everything else in reality. There was a real theological, ideological transformation that the Baal Shem Tov did to Torah.
That almost everything.
Yeah, he changed everything.
That turns over.
Yeah, this idea of every leaf, that's the Baal Shem Tov's words, right? Which is it's not just a pretty story, it was a lesson he was trying to tell. It's not just man, it's every leaf. Right? So that idea is, he entered into the Shabbos, into our consciousness. This is called Nay Chadush. This is the Shabbos. K'yidua shekol tefillah mevav yomei maisa hi ha'aram b'chinas Shabbos kanal. As it's known that every davening, and this is 100% what we're speaking about, every davening from the 6 days of the week, in other words, your weekday davenings, what are they? They're a shine from Shabbos. In other words, it's entering the Shabbos. And this is exactly what we're saying, the hishtalshel of the kesarim, how the kesar keeps reappearing in different places. This is exactly what, when you go into davening, it's basically you're pushing away the world and finding Shabbos in that moment. Every davening is a little Shabbos. That's why it has similar laws to Shabbos. You're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to deal with the world. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to do anything but sit there and think. So Shabbos is like a day of tefillah, and every little tefillah you have is like a little shine of Shabbos in that moment. So you can return to this Shabbos level periodically throughout your week and throughout your day, and with hashgacha pratis throughout every moment if you want to. And this is what we were saying before. This level sort of finds its way back in at every stage. It's never not there. It's just not seen.
Shabbos is the best.
Like the ayin of the yesh, like we're always saying, it never went anywhere. It's just the yesh is sort of blocking it. If you push away the yesh a little bit, you see that the whole thing is sitting on ayin still. It's right there underlying everything.
So it's weird because you're excited for Shabbos, and then when it's Shabbos and it ends, you're excited for the week.
You're excited for the week because you want to bring basically
Yeah.
all new things into Shabbos.
Exactly. But you realize because of Shabbos, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there's like also Mashiach isn't necessarily going to arrive on Shabbos, so then Nazi Shabbos is the first moment.
Right.
5 hours.
The Rabbi said, interestingly to that,
Is that
that Mashiach, he once time said, that we're referring at a time when Mashiach is officially not supposed to come, and he said, and he should come right now anyway, and when he gets here, he'll answer that just like he answers all the other questions.
exactly.
So, we don't have any more, the Rebbe took away the concept of, this is not a good time for Mashiach, Bichlal, like it doesn't, even from Chazal.
good to know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spread the word, It's like the third meal. We got to make our voice heard here. All right, guys, let's go for it. Coming into Shabbos for real right now.
Yeah.
And not only that, it's the first Shabbos of the real weekday. The first Shabbos of Baruch Hashem. We've been in Shabbos. Shabbos. That's
Are we having?
There's also the first